This is Emily Frisbee. I'm the partner account manager that covers the Pac Northwest and Rockies. Logan, our engineer here, will be taking us through the slides today. So over to you, Logan.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Keith. Hey, everyone. My name is Logan Danielson. As Emily mentioned, I'm one of our partner systems engineers here in the Pac Northwest and Rockies. I'm based out of beautiful, rainy Eugene, Oregon. So today we'll be talking through some of Juniper's solutions, particularly kind of why Juniper, right, and kind of really where we see ourselves differentiating and adding a lot of that additional value. Be going through some of what I consider the fun stuff, which is automation and management side of things. We'll also be talking about kind of where Juniper plays in the data center and where we see that transition to the cloud going. We'll also review some resources for you guys to be able to take home, and then we'll have a short Q&A section at the end. That being said, though, if anyone here on the call has questions or clarifications that you'd like to bring up, in the meantime, please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I always encourage interruptions, so just keep that in mind and we'll get started here. So first of all, why Juniper? So when we're talking about Juniper and really the value behind it, I usually focus on these three pillars. And all three of these really come from our DNA and our background as a company, which for those of you who don't know, we were founded in 1994 with pretty much the sole vision of providing a high capacity router that was able to withstand the ever increasing and suddenly increasing requirements of the networks at that time. So that's always been where we've excelled, is in service provider and telco. And so really over the years, we've expanded that to all other parts of the network and all other kind of segments of the industry. So really when we're talking about Juniper's performance, right, you're getting service provider, carrier grade, line rate performance, right? You're getting that security that those high-end SPs necessitate. You're getting obviously the scale and density that comes along with those, as well as just the broad feature sets and protocol support, right, that all of those higher end customers need. You're also getting our virtual chassis technology, which we'll be diving into a little bit more, as well as our in-service software upgrades, which actually allow us to upgrade individual devices or whole racks and whole stacks of devices, upgrade software, commit changes without ever dropping packets. So really you're getting a huge amount of features and reliability that are really normally only targeted towards the highest end customers in the world. But by going with Juniper, you're getting all of that engineering reliability and value, even with, no matter the size of the deployment, whether it's, large or small. Another important piece of understanding why Juniper is so useful and valuable is our simplicity. So with that, we have one JUNOS across all of our platforms. So I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a second here, but we keep one operating system across all of our platforms: routing, switching, security, physical, virtual, all of that. On top of that, that JUNOS OS is incredibly open and automatable. We support a lot of different open standards and protocols for automation, as well as individual APIs for each subcomponent of the operating system, which again, I'll talk to more in just a moment here. So the one JUNOS. So a big part of the value in this that we find is that you really just have one technology across multiple products, right? So if you have an engineer, right, a network engineer somewhere that's, trained up on, let's say, branch routers from Juniper, right, our smaller end MX, Well, when that engineer goes and starts playing around in the data center or starts using even our, virtual firewall, starts learning to use that, or changes roles, changes departments, needs to go and start working with a completely different set of products, they're going to end up working on, if it's still Juniper, they're going to end up working on the same exact CLI, the same control plane, the same operating system architecture, with all the same high availability features, all the same upgrades. And that applies to all of the API tools, all of the automation tools. So anybody, a network engineer who's automating at a large service provider can take all of that knowledge and expertise and directly apply it to a much smaller, campus deployment, for example. This is all across one release train coming from Juniper 2. So it's highly reliable. And well supported in terms of security and feature upgrades and things like that. Another great thing about JUNOS is our commit model. So this is often something that's interesting to most folks and really, really, really interesting to engineers. So I know not most folks on this call are not hands-on deployment engineers, but that being said, the commit model, essentially, the way we do configuration changes at Juniper is that we don't just type out a new configuration change, hit enter, it goes out and applies it to the network and makes all these changes. Basically, when an engineer is working on a Juniper device and making some kind of configuration change, they have to commit that first, right? And when they commit that, it goes through a series of automated checks to essentially make sure that change in the configuration isn't going to break anything on the network. Or if it is, then it at least will let you know or give you an option to reverse that change before something breaks. So really, this eliminates most human error when it comes to configuration changes, because if you make an error, it'll stop you before that error actually happens. I heard a great story recently of an engineer who was going to set up a remote site. They didn't have remote management on that site, and the site in particular was something like an 8-hour flight away, direct, somewhere in the Caribbean. He went down there to go do some upgrades, put in a commit, did commit confirm so that the commit wouldn't have gone through if it would break something. And sure enough, put on that commit confirm, hopped on the flight, had the local engineer come back and check it later. Turns out that commit had a small error in it. The commit confirm had stopped that error from going through and breaking the network, which ended up saving this engineer a 16-hour round trip flight. So just one example of really how we can eliminate a lot of that risk and human error from even just basic configuration changes. So as promised, wanted to talk a little bit more about the virtual chassis too. So like I said, this is basically stacking on steroids. There's a lot of different names for it in the industry, FEX, there lots of different terminologies, lots of different protocols that people like to call it by. But again, this is just switch stacking, connecting a bunch of them in the backplane. The big difference, or a few of the big differences for Juniper, is that first of all, they can be separated by up to 80 kilometers. So you can actually have multiple stacks interconnected, multiple devices stacking with each other across a campus. So theoretically, you could have 10 switches across a campus network, all working together as one and being managed as a single device with multiple line cards. Another great thing about this is that, with one tiny exception, this is of no cost and supported on our entire switching line across our EX campus switches as well as our QFX data center switches. And you can mix and match within a single or across platforms with that. So theoretically, you could have 10 completely different switches, all running a different OS version, all playing different role, but all being managed as a single device with a whole bunch of different ports. This is also available like across the network stack. So everything from down the leaf and the access layer all the way up to the core and data center interconnect. This is supported on all of our products, on all of our switching products, I should say. And even within this, these virtual chassis that we can build out do support all of our high availability and high reliability features. So see a lot of acronyms down there on the bottom box: nonstop routing, nonstop bridging, nonstop service upgrades, and in-service software upgrades. So you can take, you know, a stack of, you know, up to 10 switches, and you can run a software update, a configuration change, firmware update across one or multiple or all of the devices in that stack, and never drop a packet. So that's something that's really, really cool and unique, and kind of really shows that that telco level reliability that we offer. So pulling it back a little bit, going up to a 50,000 foot view, this is all nice and this is all really valuable, but where is it available? Well, in short, it's available everywhere. So, you know, similar to Keith's slide, Juniper nowadays, right, we came from pretty much a pure service provider routing background, and we've now expanded into all parts of the network. So we have a great suite of you know, services and white glove services that we offer. Some of those are through Sanity as well. We have some great software offerings, including that one JUNOS, as well as our CONTRAIL orchestration solution, which we'll be getting to in a little bit here. You know, we have Wi-Fi switching, which we talked about, routing, and security. So security is listed twice here. Bottom right, that's really just to, you know, say, hey, we have a full line of, you know, full next generation firewalls, both physical and virtual. However, as you can see, connected security is really something that we see as overarching across our portfolio, right, and across all parts of the network, right? Whether, you know, you're at a campus, whether you're in the data center, whether you're in a public or a private cloud, right? Security is something that's kind of an overarching theme, right, across all parts of the infrastructure. And so we'll get into that a little bit more and kind of how we implement that. So this is all great. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased in terms of liking Juniper a lot, but I also did want to take a moment to mention that we have been recognized for this by a lot of neutral third parties. So IHS Markit rated us #1 in 4 out of 5 areas for selection criteria for service providers. So that's to say we're still leading, and we're still doing very well in our core business, and you know, where we've built our reputation from. We still hold that reputation. Beyond that, we've been recognized by customers through Gartner Peer Insights as the #1 choice for data center networking for 2 months, as well as wired and wireless infrastructure for our EX line of switches, as well as the Mist wireless we just added. And then we've also been recognized by those agencies themselves as a leader in data center networking. So, you know, for those of you who may have dealt with Juniper in the past, but not recently, this, you know, may be coming as somewhat of a surprise to you. But we really have made some very large investments and very large advancements in our data center plays. So with that, I'll move on to what I think is the cool stuff personally, which is automation and management. So first of all, just want to make a quick differentiation here. Network automation is not necessarily equal automated networks. So when you think of a network, right, you know, it's a large physical, you know, let's say relatively static environment, right? You can't automate the, you know, bare metal box sitting on the rack or the cable lying on the floor, right? You can't automate a network any more than you can automate a table, right? When we're talking about automation, we're talking about automating workflows and operations, right? We're talking about automating day-to-day tasks that humans would go and perform that we can automate, right? So this isn't saying we're gonna, get everyone's hands completely off of everything, and then suddenly we're just gonna forget about infrastructure. No, this is just to say we're focusing on workflows. So where do these workflows come from? Really to get towards the end goal, right, of automated net ops, right? Being able to, sit down at your network every day and just look at, what can be improved, what can be added, what can be expanded, not what do I need to keep doing today to keep the network up and running and just working. So that comes from both sides, from us, the vendor, and from you or your customers, the customers, right? We build products that are high quality, they're reliable, they're open. We have a lot of pre-built tools for those, and we build these products so that they can easily be integrated with our competitors, with complementary solutions. Whatever it may be. So we're building simple and automatable devices and tools so that our customers and these operations engineers can take those open, very generalized tools and apply them to however they're doing things and however is most relevant and most valuable to their network or their customer or their business base, let's say. So where does this value lie? Well, really these three main pillars. So like I already talked about, right, huge amount of value coming from that JUNOS OS and just being able to have one operating system that you can jump between. I mean, I kind of made a brief mention of it, but with that one JUNOS, right, it's a single platform for APIs. It's a single platform for automation, right? So, if you're automating Juniper in general, you're just automating Juniper. You're not automating our switches or our routers or security. It's all the same. Same thing applies to a lot of our management, right? CONTRAIL, we have, one platform for fabric orchestration and management across private and public cloud workloads. We have REST APIs for all of that as well, right? And so it's all based on these same open standards, open APIs, and open technologies, right? So anytime that you're going to automate and build something like this, you don't need to worry again about having any kind of proprietary protocol that you have to rely on, or not having this work with other devices, or having to completely rewrite or repurpose something. In addition to that, for anyone, any DevOps folks that are really needing a lot of high-level granular control, or for that matter, anyone in, let's say, healthcare, finance, government, anybody that needs really, really specific control and visibility into everything they're doing, that's part of all this as well, right? So we actually have individual separate APIs for different subcomponents of the operating system and the silicone for that matter, which we'll be getting into as well. But really that's just to say that, no matter what layer at which you're automating, again, whether it's down to the actual physical hardware or all the way up on the management and the GUI side, you can automate any part of this individually. So this is all based on a big, broad portfolio of automation technologies we support. This is just a snapshot, obviously not a comprehensive list, but just to say, most of the stuff, most of the communication we do with our automation scripts is over netconf protocols or REST APIs, right? Very common things. All this integrates super nicely with stuff like SaltStack, Chef, Puppet, things I'm sure you've all heard of before, or are familiar with personally. And then one really cool thing I always like to point out is PyEasy and Python. So PyEasy is a Python library we have built for JUNOS. So that actually takes a lot of the that takes a good amount of what little legwork there was already to build an automation script, and kind of even further simplifies it. So with PyEasy, you can really just do one-line commands to be, pulling or pushing information onto a JUNOS box. Now, even easier, Python has been shipping on box on all of our devices, physical and virtual, since JUNOS release 16.1, I believe, which was a couple of years ago. So for the last 2 years and up to including now, any NetOps engineer can jump onto a Juniper box, kick themselves out into a Unix shell, write a quick Python script to automate a health check or a scheduled configuration change. They can run that script right on the box without the need of any helper VMs or servers or anything else running on the network. That automation component can actually be running and supported 100% on box with no additional resources. So really nice little value add there. And, if you're talking to any of your folks or even, considering it yourself and you kind of want to see, okay, well, is this useful? How concrete is this? Will I need to, get a degree in programming to really make this useful? Well, short answer is no. So NRE Labs is Network Reliability Engineers Labs, great organization that believes in learning by doing. So they have a lot of really great lessons that are available free online to anyone, anytime, that teaches you the basics of network automation using a few different technologies, including Juniper's virtual devices. So you can see in this screenshot here, one of the devices they're working on is a VQFX1, which is a virtualized version of one of our data center switches. So, anybody that is looking to start automating their operations at a data center, you can send them right here and say, hey, you can see exactly, how quick and how helpful it can be, just to jump on here anytime. So I wouldn't, for the sake of time, we won't be going through any one of these solutions in depth today, unfortunately. But this is just to show that, from a pre-built management side, we do have an option kind of for every different part of the network. So, we support and encourage, right, any NetOps and network owners to, automate and customize it however they want. But for anybody looking for, a pre-built solution, a single pane of glass, we do have a lot of different options. Sky Enterprise in particular, I really like as, and a lot of folks really like as a campus and branch deployment and management solution. So we've got great ZTP deployment of SRX and EX firewalls. And then another cool thing about here that I wanted to point out really quickly was the CONTRAIL service orchestrator there under the SD-WAN and SD-LAN side. So that's actually a cloud-hosted SD-WAN product that Juniper sells, and that's a fully featured SD-WAN solution, switch failover, SLA setting, intent-based security policy, application-based routing. Very, very cool solution that is now being extended into the LAN side of things as well. So a lot of different cool options if you're looking for any specific pre-built management part. So getting into the meat of it here, Juniper and data center. Do a quick time check here. All right, all good. So Juniper in the data center, we really kind of try and focus our engineering efforts in three main ways, or in three main areas, I should say. First being rich portfolio, right? I've, kind of talked about it, that we, support our products end to end, the smallest to the largest. But this is really everywhere from 10 gig all the way up to 40 gig and everything in between, and any combination of everything in between. So that's running on a combination of custom and merchant silicone. So no matter, the size or the requirements of the data center, right, the smallest of the small to, the largest of the large, right? Big data center interconnect, bleeding edge, 400 gig ports. We support it all. Just like everything else we make, it's all based on open standards, open technologies. We really try and avoid locking anyone in. So if you do want to bring Juniper into your data center and bring that reliability in, it's not going to break anything. It's not going to be, difficult to play with. And we also see that that's really necessary. And so we will talk about this a little bit more, but we've developed some great strategic partnerships around some of the data center products. Also, we do recognize that the data center is changing, right? It's not just a matter of kind of hosted hardware anymore, right? It's moving more and more towards a combination of, private data center, public data center, private cloud, public cloud, colo. It's and often a combination of all of the above, right? So we recognize that it's not as much of a static or predictable environment, and we've definitely made investments in that area. So first off, how does this all put together, right? Fabric is a lot of times the first thing that is addressed when talking about a big DC deployment, right? Is how are we going to put this together? How are we going to manage it? One option, right? It's classic. I'm sure many of you have heard it before. IP Fabric, very reliable, open, standards-based. Folks have been using it for a while. We do support that, and that's usually for your much larger scale deployments, and when you would maybe be implementing MPLS as well at that point. For anything smaller than that, and for most of our mid-range data center deployments, we recommend EVPN VXLAN as our fabric. So that works, again, across our devices. And one really cool thing about that is it can operate as controller mode, right? So having, a master switch, commanding and making fabric changes, or controllerless mode, right? So essentially each, part of that fabric can operate and make decisions independently. If you kind of want to take away a lot of that granularity from it and simplify a lot of that fabric, is when we would look at bringing in CONTRAIL. So really it's as simple as it says right there. It's essentially just fabric automation. So, instead of having to go and, set up the individual tunnels and individual roles for EVPN VXLAN jumping into the CLI, you can just basically bring all of that, as well as any private and public cloud workloads you have running, and just put it under a single pane of glass with, a single set of policies and security settings. If we want to look into the analytics side of it a little bit more, let's say you don't have a big complicated deployment and you just want some telemetry, you want some better insight into that. We do have some separate sub-products, right? AppFormix, HealthBot. We sell a few other individual bots that kind of just help that side of things. So this is all built on our data center portfolio. So this is just a really brief look at it. Again, supports all the way from the Leaf little top rack deployments all the way up to those more complex data center interconnect projects. You'll see on the very low end of the Leaf here is the EX4300. So that's one of our higher end enterprise campus switches. So there is a use case sometimes for bringing those into the data center, particularly for customers that need a top rack switch that doesn't support multi-gig. And then for the rest of Leaf deployments, you're mostly going to be looking at the QFX 5K series. For anything in the spine and data center interconnect, you're pretty much mostly only going to be looking at the QFX 10,000 series. as you can hopefully see from the graphic there as well. Once you get into the QFX 10008 and 10016, that's when you start getting into actually our modular chassis. So similar to our higher end, service provider oriented MX routers, those are modular modular switch chassis with hot swappable line cards, power supplies, fan units, faceplates, all of that fun stuff. So really, once you do get into those, larger data center deployments, Juniper kind of moves to the more common model of being able to have an expandable chassis, right, to kind of provide that extra forward investment protection. And as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, any customer looking to scale to that size is likely going to continue to scale and continue to expand. There also is occasionally a use case for our MX series routers once you get into some of the larger fabrics and deployments, as I was mentioning, right? If you're looking at, IP fabric or doing an MPLS network, that's likely something that you'll be integrating as a component. So not to overload with portfolio slides here, but this is really, I just wanted to illustrate again, the QFX 5K series, that's your leaf and top of rack. 5200 series, that's sort of your, middle ground where you'll be looking at spine. And then for spine and interconnect, you're most basically going to exclusively be looking at the QFX 10K series, and then occasionally those higher end MX and PTX routers. The only other thing I wanted to use this slide for is to show that for all of our products, from the 5100 up to the 5220, it is using either the Trident or the Tomahawk chipsets. Now those are merchant silicone from Broadcom. And so what you're getting there is same performance or reliability, port density, multi-gig density from those QFX switches, but at a much more reasonable and affordable price because it's not using custom silicone. Now that being said, should you or your customer have a use case for the much higher end data center deployments in the case of the 10,002s, that's when you actually get into the Juniper Q5 custom silicone ASICs. So I know this is probably a zone out and stop paying attention moment for everybody, but I promise I'll make this simple. So essentially, the big value difference here, right, is that QFX 5K, a little bit smaller scale, right? You don't have as much of the open programmability density as our custom silicone, but it's cost optimized. It's a fixed system. Again, you get the same openness and reliability from Juniper, but just at a really reasonable price. Again, anybody that's really focused on performance can go with the 10Ks, which have our custom silicone. So the big difference for that one is that our custom silicone and that external memory buffer you see there is programmable. So essentially, as their network scales, right, they can you can continue to add line cards, add capacity, add power supplies to expand the actual physical chassis. But then you can also be through software upgrades and JUNOS updates. You can be reprogramming and re-updating the actual silicone itself to support new protocols, new technologies, new automation solutions, whatever it may be. So really, when you're going with our high-end and more modular chassis, you're not just getting physical forward investment protection, you're getting it all the way down to the silicone itself. All right, so getting back into CONTRAIL, our fun little make the fabric invisible friend. So CONTRAIL's quite a large product, right? Just for the nature of how much it supports and everything it can do. So, I would say this product itself could warrant its own 2-hour webinar, but just for a quick overview, we've already touched on it. It can operate in with any cloud, right? So it can be managing your switching and networking fabrics across, your personal physical data center, whether it's in AWS, Azure, private instance, whatever it may be. This is also across different workloads, right? So regardless of whether it's a physical or virtual device or whether it's even a networking device, right? It could be, CONTRAIL takes a look at the storage side of things, right? The server side of things. It looks at all the different components of the network and of the IT, and is able to make decisions based on that. Just like everything we've been talking about, right? This works in greenfield, brownfield, single or multi-vendor. We play nice with everything. We don't care, what the environment looks like going into it. We'll operate with it. So a good and very brief example of this is our integration between CONTRAIL and the VMware workload and storage integrators, or orchestrators. So with this integration, one use case might be, let's say when a NAS storage unit, right, that's being controlled by VMware breaches capacity, you want to put that NAS storage in a new VLAN. You want to segment it out, and you want to open up a new route to a new unused NAS unit, right? Well, you could essentially have the VMware orchestrator tell CONTRAIL, hey, this got full. I need to trigger this network change. CONTRAIL will see the change it needs to make in the actual switching fabric. It'll go out, push those changes, let VMware know it's done. VMware can make the switch over, and everything just happens magically and nicely in the background. So just one little granular example use case there. So this is all really pushing towards what we see as the multi-cloud future. So, again, I've said it many times, but this just sort of visualizes it, right? You can have many different sites running many different, protocols, fabric options. You can have this with sites you control, sites you don't control, a mix of physical, a mix of virtual, a mix of proprietary and open standards, and you can be controlled trail. All right. The inside next have both kind of seen each other as best of breed in our respective areas. And so we do have a very strong corporate and engineering partnership with them. Now, this is not to say that we don't have, an OEM product or, a joint box we're selling by any means, but this is just to say that, we see our products playing well together, and we've been putting a lot of engineering resources towards supporting that. So the NUTANIX platform can actually take our virtualized and containerized firewalls, micro-segment them out, pull out individual networking components of that, dynamically spin up and spin down as your security requirements change in your virtual environment. And then we've also done things like integrate the NUTANIX Prism platform to integrate with CONTRAIL, as well as some of our other management products, right, to trigger those networking and fabric changes based on what's happening with the actual compute and storage. So there's a lot to talk about here. It's mostly really nerdy stuff, but just to say, we really do see the data center and IT operations as more than just the network, right? We recognize that it's more than just the routers and switches running everything back and forth, right? It's about the workloads, it's about the data, it's about the actual users and providing a good experience for that. So we've talked a lot about, automation, talked about a lot of different fabrics. This is just a nice quick overview showing kind of where everything fits again. So right? Small enterprise, you'll be looking at just doing a little virtual chassis, maybe a virtual chassis fabric. For the higher end small enterprise and everything in the mid-range, you're mostly going to be looking at that EVPN VXLAN stack. And again, hyperscaling IP and MPLS fabric pretty much exclusively, and we support all the technologies associated with that and all the different port speed options. So what value does this deliver? Well, CONTRAIL and AppFormix, right? You get a single pane of glass, you have more time in the day, lower CapEx, right? For technology side of things, right, you only have one operating system you have to deal with. You know, it's a single set of solutions, single set of technologies, less people to hire, less training to spend on. You got lower OpEx, and just having a common hardware and software platform, right, just really accelerates the time to network upgrades and things like that. So I realize we're coming a little short on time here, so I'll just do a brief overview of kind of where Juniper sees security. So as I mentioned, as you can see here, we do have some best in breed next generation firewalls, our SRXs. We have a virtualized and containerized versions of those as well. And a quick side note onto that. So SRX, it is our next generation firewall. That's the name for our firewall platform line. But that actually stands for security, route, and switch. So all of our firewalls, physical and virtual, actually support full L2 and L3 route and switch. So really L2 through L7, all of our firewalls support. So we see, I've actually personally seen folks running entire BGP deployments from a branch firewall, right? You know, a lot of times these can be deployed as, you know, perimeter firewalls. And then, you know, again, let's say you need a new top of rack switch temporarily, you can just throw the SRX in there and boom, suddenly it's a top of rack switch. So you get a ton of repurposability and just a ton of value investing in that that SRX line. That does, you know, that's a full next generation firewall too. So, you know, IPS, IDS, application tracking, all that, you know, fun stuff is fully featured on there. So getting back to kind of the connected security and the previous slide where I talked about how Juniper kind of sees security as a cohesive theme across the entire network and the entire IT organization, right? So that's really to say we see the network as a zero trust policy, right? So you know what it says at the bottom right there, it's a single enforcement domain, and every element in the network should be considered an enforcement point, right? Because really the idea of having a bunch of different, you know, layers of walled security, right, of many different perimeters, and then trusting anything that gets past a perimeter is just flawed, right? That doesn't account for bad actors and phishing and you know, a lot of the more you know, modern and dynamic issues we've seen with security in the recent past. So kind of how we're combating that is with, for one, our detection component, which primarily relies on our SkyTP solution. So that's actually an AI engine that we have running in the cloud. And so customers that are subscribed to that have their security data anonymously sent up to the Juniper cloud. The AI in there takes a look at everything, takes a look at potential threats, and is able to correlate certain anomalies with potential threats and identify zero-day threats and zero-day malware and actually block those before they can ever affect the network. So how that's blocked is through the security director and policy enforcer component here. So once it, you know, receives that there is a potential zero-day threat coming from SkyTP that it's identified, then it can actually dynamically create a policy, right, based on settings you've created, and it can go enforce a security policy on any of our devices. So that's not just saying, you know, okay, I'm going to change the security policy on my firewall. We can push down, you know, port level configurations to our EX and QFX switches, our MX routers, and actually do a lot of different third-party elements. So just rattling off the top here, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, Arrowhive, ClearPass, Cisco switches, Aruba switches, basically name another element in the network and we can use that as an enforcement point. So it's not just a matter of, you know, someone logs onto the network and they're considered good. It's, you know, anytime there's a potential threat that comes up, you can actually stop that threat at the source. All right, so coming up on the end of the hour here, I'll jump right to our resources. So how can you go out and actually make use of this? So normally I'm pretty hesitant to be the guy that tells somebody to go, you know, watch a YouTube video. But if you do want a little bit more information as to, you know, exactly right how CONTRAIL makes these fabric switches, if you want to understand a little bit better, you know, where each of our individual QFX switches plays. Our data center playlist on our public website and on YouTube is a great place to get a little more granular view of a lot of this stuff. Juniper.net/try is a URL that I try and send everybody to and that I actually use myself. So that's our main page for all of our trial software and everything like that. This is just a quick glance as to a few of the things you can get free trials there for. So, you know, I mentioned CONTRAIL service orchestration, our SD-WAN solution. You can go to that URL, juniper.net/try, and get a fully virtualized, fully deployed SD-WAN environment with virtualized traffic running that you can go around and play around and you know, get your hands dirty with that product. Same thing goes for our virtual devices. You can go and try those out on our JLabs, on our virtualized labs, so you can just go jump in anytime and get your hands dirty with the operating system. For anybody that's a little bit more security focused, we do have a free 60-day trial of our virtualized firewall, our VSRX. That's, you know, supported on basically every virtualization platform, VMware, KVM, you know, kind of pick your flavor. And then we also have a free 30-day trial of our SkyTP AI detection engine as well. So if you kind of want to see, you know, really what that can do in terms of, you know, sandboxing and detecting those zero-day threats and doing all that nice third-party blocking that I mentioned, you can go get a free trial and test that out today. And for anyone that's interested in really getting their hands dirty, or, you know, should you have any clients that, you know, are looking to get into Juniper, we actually do have a lot of free learning resources. So we have free courses for most of our entry-level certifications, as well as a whole bunch of other good tools, whether you're configuring this stuff or pitching it to be sold. So with that being said, we've come up on time. I really appreciate everyone joining, and I'll open it up to questions now.